And welcoming you back here to the Orange Media Network studios. My name is Keenan Punkocher, alongside my partner in crime, Caleb LaChapelle, so to speak. As we're dissecting this election coverage, we're going to be with you for most of the night, unless it goes through maybe 5 a.m., at which point we all got classes tomorrow.
So I don't have one till noon. I think we're good to stay here most of the night.
Well, as many, we're on Facebook Live here as well as on Orange Media Network. This is kind of myself and Caleb's forte. We thrive on this kind of political news. So this is we're right in our elements here. But while we were gone, a key state of Colorado did go to Secretary Clinton. Colorado with a state with 9 electoral votes there. I don't think too many people were expecting a Donald Trump victory in Colorado. Obviously, there's been a lot of surprises so far this election.
Yeah.
But Colorado, I think, is one that Hillary Clinton probably felt pretty safe about. I want to touch briefly on, real quick, a state that we haven't talked a whole lot about just because there hasn't been a ton of voting yet, but with 56% of the vote in Arizona. Donald Trump has about a 3% lead. Again, this is about 50, now, just got updated, about 56% of the vote in. It looks like Donald Trump has about a 3% lead. Now, to me, again, it's early, but to me, I think Hillary Clinton has to be happy, only trailing 3% so far in Arizona, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And like I touched on the last time we were live, I think the southern portion of Arizona going blue is a huge contributor to that.
A little unconventional, yeah.
It is very unconventional. The southern portion around the border with Mexico of Arizona is usually a very red heavy place, and we're basically just waiting on Maricopa County in Arizona. That's the major
a key county.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a key county that has tended to go Republican in the past.
Yep.
But it also flips pretty regularly. So that's a key state. But I also really want to touch on a state that since we were off the air has actually kind of taken a twist. Pennsylvania right now is a state with about 66% of the vote counted. Hillary Clinton has only, if you can believe this, about a 1.5% lead.
2.5.
About 2.5%, lead in Pennsylvania. That, to me, she might be happy in Arizona, but I think she's pretty worried out there in Philadelphia.
I guarantee you she's worried there in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is a state she has to win to retain her shot at 270. I'd say.
Yeah, and again, we're going to kind of go round table here through the states. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but in many of the key battleground states, such as Wisconsin and Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, and in Florida, Donald Trump has at least a 1.5 to 2% and beyond lead in those states currently.
Yep.
So we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but if she loses Pennsylvania, there's not a huge path to 270 that you can safely say if Secretary Clinton loses Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no. If she was to lose Pennsylvania, she'd need to pick off Wisconsin or Minnesota, which are both. Actually, Minnesota. Have you seen Minnesota's?
See. Are you getting updated here?
Yeah, Minnesota. Clinton's got about a 12% lead, as far as I can tell, in the state of Minnesota.
I see that. Yeah.
That's a change.
That is a change. Yeah, that Minnesota's not a state that has it hasn't been analyzed necessarily as a key battleground state, but it is a state where 10 electoral votes out there in that same kind of area next to Ohio, it does play a pretty big factor in. Just to reiterate what you said, about 38% of the vote in Minnesota, with about a 12% lead for Hillary Clinton. That would be pretty big for her, I think.
And then as well, Wisconsin, she was down about 8 points earlier, and now she's trailing by about 3. So yeah. She's making some definite pushes towards taking control in those states.
Yeah, and one quick state to update as well on is New Hampshire. New Hampshire, we've been paying special attention, myself and Caleb, to, because it's a state where historically it's been pretty Democratic.
Yep.
We've touched on that earlier as well, that it's been fairly a Democratic state. Donald Trump does have about a 4% lead right now in New Hampshire. Again, it's a state where there's only about 4 electoral votes, but in the bigger scheme of things, like with Ohio, where we saw Donald Trump just take Ohio, if Donald Trump takes New Hampshire, I think that kind of shows a trend of where this is going.
Well, also, just checking in on another one of those key battleground states, Michigan, Donald Trump's lead has slipped to about 2.5% in Michigan. He's up about 50,000 votes. And then as well, Gary Johnson is putting in about 3.7% of the votes. He's got 83,000, and then Jill Stein's also got up over the 1% mark. She's at 24,000.
So I do want to keep in mind here, as I've mentioned before, we are using CNN largely for most of our coverage. We have a live stream here of CNN, but I do want to update viewers here. According to NPR Politics, again, you know, pretty credited news organization, NPR Politics is projecting Donald Trump to win Florida.
Ooh.
Now, again, before we actually see it here on CNN, we're not going to say that necessarily, but NPR is saying that Donald Trump will win Florida. And John McCain, that has been confirmed. John McCain has won re-election in Arizona, as many people expected.
Yeah.
But according to NPR Politics, Donald Trump is projected to win Florida. Again, we're looking live here at CNN. There's about 95% of the vote still in, but NPR, maybe a little bit more of a liberal news organization than CNN, feels confident in giving it to Donald Trump.
Yeah, that is true. Even though NPR has seemed to at least center themselves, if not maybe fall a little bit onto the Republican or the conservative side of things throughout this election.
Yeah, I agree. And to kind of complement that as well, I think what we're seeing now as well, like you said in Michigan, Donald Trump's lead is shrinking a little bit down, about 46% of the vote in there. It's about 48% Trump, 46% for Clinton. And in Iowa, too, we're actually seeing Hillary kind of reclaim her lead a little bit. Yep. Only about 40% of the vote in Iowa, but she holds about a 6% lead in Iowa. That's probably going to fluctuate as we go along here. But just to remind everybody of the current vote total here, it looks like 167, again, this is according to CNN, 167 votes for Donald Trump compared to 131 for Hillary Clinton. Yep. Donald Trump still winning the popular vote by about 3% as well.
Yep. And then we're about a minute and a half away from polls closing on the West Coast here, where we're at in Oregon, and that should even up the popular vote. California is the most populous state in our 50 states, and they will be closing soon.
Yeah, and I would imagine we're standing by here for a CNN projection, so I'll cut myself off if we do get that live. But one thing I do think is pretty soon to be projected is the state of Georgia. Yeah. We've touched on it a little bit. Donald Trump is just extending his lead there. He now has about a 17% lead with about 50% of the votes in. If I'm clicking here in the state of Georgia, I'm just curious. Let's see here. Most of the cities are still not quite in. It looks like Atlanta County, that's the Fulton County, if many people know out there in Georgia. But in Atlanta, only about 40% of the vote in there. So I'm wondering if they're just maybe reeling it back a little bit. But again, Georgia is a key state because it's a state that I think many people thought maybe Hillary could win, but if she doesn't, that is 16. It's important not to overshadow the importance of Georgia because that would boost. Georgia, again, has more electoral votes than North Carolina by one. Yeah, it does. So if Donald Trump, we're doing the math here, we're kind of paying attention to the CNN big board as well as our computers here. It's interesting to see because if NPR was correct and Donald Trump is able to carry Florida, right now he's ahead in North Carolina, he's ahead in Georgia. It becomes very tough for Donald Trump, or for Hillary Clinton rather, to find a path.
And I think that path, if he is to pick up Florida, I think that path lies in the northern part of the country, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota.
And not surprising here we're getting CNN live news. It's not a big shocker by any means, but CNN is projecting Hillary Clinton to win both the state of California and Hawaii. Really, more than anything, what this is going to do is this is just going to boost Hillary Clinton's electoral count vote over Donald Trump. She's going to claim the 55 electoral votes in California. Yeah. CNN is also just projecting, very unsurprising, Idaho goes to Donald Trump. Idaho, although it's a sister state right next to Oregon, it's a fairly conservative state. Idaho also housing 4 electoral votes. So according to CNN, again, California and Hawaii goes to Hillary Clinton, while Idaho goes to Donald Trump. Current electoral map shows 190 electoral votes for Hillary Clinton and 171 for Donald Trump. She does reclaim the lead.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not, as you said, not surprising at all. Pretty much, unless you're Ronald Reagan and you're a Republican, you usually start out down 55 electoral votes with the state of California almost always going to the Democratic candidate.
And again, the polls that just closed were the ones on the West Coast here. 8 o'clock, they do tend to close. So Oregon, Idaho, Washington, California, Hawaii, Alaska stays up a little bit later. So with that, we are going to take a short break here because pretty soon we're going to start getting local Oregon voter coverage as well. That's something that we're paying special attention to. A lot of important ballot measures that voters went to the polls on. It's starting to come in. So we're going to take a quick break. Lots to still dissect, lots to talk about, and pretty soon we might have a next president. So stay tuned. For myself and Caleb, we'll be right back.